Hi, everyone, and welcome to Family Values at Work's People's Response, where we join with awesome folks from our network and awesome national partners to offer our response to the State of the Union, which happened last night. I am so happy to have you all joining us today, and I'm excited about the conversation that we are going to get into. If you're following us or following along with this conversation, we would love it if you join us in the conversation on social media, whether that's on Instagram or Twitter. You can follow us at FMLY Values Work on Twitter and have this conversation with us using the hashtag SOTU 2024, as well as hashtag Network Strong. Follow along with us as we give our thoughts and our interpretation about the conversation that happened last night. And I am so honored to be joined by incredible co-panelists and co-hosts that are going to have this conversation with me. The brilliant Sammy, who is on Family Values at Work's federal team, and Mel from Poder Latinx. I will let them briefly introduce themselves before we jump right into this conversation. Sammy, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell me one thing you're super excited about for the weekend.
Thanks, Josie. Hi, everyone. My name's Sammy Chavin Grant, she, her, with Family Values at Work. I'm our federal strategy director, and I've been here for about 3 years. And I'm looking forward to using the weekend to just have some quality time with my family and loved ones. Mel, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sammy. My name is Mel. Pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm proud to serve as Poder Latinx's economic justice organizer here in Florida. One thing I am looking forward to this weekend is continuing to advocate for our immigrant community. We have a lot of local events this weekend, so really excited to continue the good work.
Sammy and Mel, thanks for joining me today in this conversation. I'm so excited. And I would be remiss if I wasn't going to celebrate the fact that I'm on an all-women panel on International Women's Day. And this year's theme is Invest in Women and Accelerate Progress, which feels spot on for the conversation that we are about to have. I'm excited to talk to you all and pick you all's brains about what you heard last night that was good, bad, ugly, amazing, exciting, all of the things, and the reality of like what it means for women and for women moving forward. I went back and forth about like, do we start with the good? Do we start with the bad and end with the good? Like, where do we start? So I think I was like, you know what? Let's start by celebrating. As a chronic critiquer, I'm like, I can start with the bad all day long. But I'm like, let's start with celebrating. President Biden last night spoke of historic progress, made mention of a lot of issues that are so important to us. I'm curious, like, what are the two things that you heard last night that have you smiling ear to ear and just celebrating and excited about what the future holds? And what do those things mean for women since we are on International Women's Day?
All right. Mel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that really perked my ears up was the demand for higher teacher raises. We know that's a field that's really dominated by women, especially women of color. And educators are our backbone. They're educating our entire, workforce. And so that's something I'm really excited about. And the other was also the demand for universal pre-K. We know that when we start early, we see those benefits long term. And so those were two things that really caught my attention that I was happy to hear.
Yeah, I will say +1 to both of that, but to name something different, I was happy to hear paid leave named. And I know we'll get into it more because like I no, we have like a very clear meaning of paid leave here at Family Values at Work and in our network with Poder. But I was really happy to hear it said, like we talked about with some folks last night, it is so important to have your issue make the center stage. And the other thing is, I have to say, home and community-based services, my grandfather is currently relying on a home health aide. And so it meant a lot to me to hear the president name that as a thing that's a priority to him. And I think that putting care in the center, I would have loved for that to be, the top line. And I hope everybody is thinking about that today. But for me, that was what I was really digging in on. Josie, what did you hear that excited you?
So, because you all already named a bunch of things that I was very excited about, I'll name 3 other things that just really, perked my interest and have such intersection to paid family and medical leave. One, we heard about making childcare more accessible and affordable for folks. We know that is so important for working families, and it's at the intersection of also needing paid family and medical leave. The second thing that I'll mention is, a nod to climate change. Like, that's really huge. We've seen all throughout last year on the East Coast, as smoke was coming down from the north, schools being closed, people not being able to go to work, people's days and weeks being disrupted and not having enough paid family and medical leave to respond. And so we really have to think about the intersection of climate change and all of the other issues that we need that are connected to the care infrastructure. And last, we'll get into the pros and cons of this, but there was lots of talk around tax fairness. And I am a tax nerd. I am a nerd about the history of taxes in this country, how inequitable it is. I don't understand how we can be one of the fastest, most economically mobile countries in this world and have one of the most regressive tax systems in this country that are such a burden for working people of color, especially. And so to hear about tax fairness, it was such a exciting moment for me. Our taxes should have very clear return on investments. And when we talk about the safety nets and the care infrastructure that we need, there is a way to structure our taxes in this country so that we're getting all of the things that we need. So I was super excited to hear a little bit about tax fairness. I was like, yes, that's what we need. That's the direction we need to be headed into. That's me as a nerd. That's totally me as a policy nerd. Mel, what you heard last night, do you think it's expansive enough for working class families? And what's the application of what you heard last night to women? Like, what do you see? What are the through lines you're drawing to the impact on what you heard the president talk about and women?
Well, there's clearly always room for improvement, always room for progress. And so we should acknowledge that, saying that we should tax wealthy individuals and corporations their fair share is a big step forward, right? Maybe 20, 30 years ago, this would have been really taboo or not something you'd expect the president of the United States to say. And so when we tax those who are already making so much money, their fair share, that really helps out the rest of us, right? It expands the economic prosperity of working class people who sometimes right now get taxed more, right, than those making more than them. And so when we lift this economic burden from working class people, specifically women, right, that just leaves room to grow. That allows us to spend our dollars on ourselves, on our local community, on our economy. We know that when everyone does better, that's just going to be better for everyone in the long run as a country and also as individuals.
Sammy, what about you? Like, what did you hear and what's the through line to the impact on women and working families?
Sure. I feel like I'm sticking at the care section because if we actually had paid family and medical leave, affordable childcare, universal pre-care, home and community-based services, that were actually adequate to meet the needs in this country. I mean, the data speaks for itself. How many women had to leave the workforce during the pandemic and were never able to return because the cost of childcare is too high.
Yeah.
I have friends who are literally doing this, back of the envelope math of, should one of the parents in their family just stop working because that would be cheaper for them than providing safe childcare for their brand new daughter. And I think about this, folks sometimes call them women's issues and toss it to the side, but the reason they're women's issues is because women are at the heart of this work. So we can't talk about care work in this country without acknowledging the history of unpaid labor of women of color providing free, or well, free is probably not the right word, but providing services of care for folks just because they were forced to, because we can't not speak about the history and legacy of care in this country. So for me, what I had hoped to hear to the question of going further is, what's the plan? How is it targeted? Who are we centering? Because I think we're all very clear, and in the advocacy space, we're all on the same page. When we say paid leave, we mean like a program that targets low-wage workers who are the least likely to have access to the program in their current jobs, that ensures that low-wage workers are the ones who receive the most of their paycheck back, because what we're talking about is stability. And at the center of that is thinking about single parent households, a lot of them women in this country, disproportionately women of color. That's who's being forgotten about when we just talk about a program without getting into the equity and getting into the weeds. So that's at the top of my mind. I want to hear the next step. What I'm thinking about, as the federal policy person, put your money where your mouth is. Show us in your budget, are we financing a comprehensive, equitable, universal paid leave program? So I'm hoping that's the next thing we see. And that's really where my mind's been. I was happy to hear care at the center. I was happy to hear, like Mel said, wages for educators. I was happy to hear about climate, and I was happy to hear about tax fairness, but I want to hear the juice. I want to get nerdy. I know there's a lot to fill in the State of the Union, but I wanted to go even deeper with the president last night.
Yes. Okay. So you started to scratch at it. I want to know, I have lots of thoughts about this, of course. But I want to know, okay, what missed the mark last night, and where the gaps? Sammy, you sort of started to get into it. But I'm curious, I want to hear from all of you all's thoughts. I know for me, there was a moment where the president of the United States reverted to really hateful language by calling immigrants illegal. And in the same speech, he basically classified immigrants as illegal and then went on to talk about other immigrants who are contributing workers to the economy. And by classifying it that way, it was such a gut punch when I think about the issues that we're talking about and how much immigrants are at the core of the workforce and of those folks impacted. As an immigrant myself, that I was so annoyed. I was so angry. And to be clear, human beings cannot be illegal on earth. That is my stance forever and always. And I'll take it a step further and say that benefactors of violent colonization should be the last ones calling anyone illegal. And so that moment for me was just like, whoa, what happened? And I want to be clear, I have yet to find a politician or an elected official that I 100% align with and agree with. So I will always see the opportunity to advance our agenda and the critique within any elected officials. And that moment last night made me roll my eyes, made me ball up my fists, and made me really, really angry and annoyed. And that's one of many moments that I'm like, wait, we missed the mark there. And that was really disheartening. But I'm wondering from you all too, like, what else sort of was missing or missed the mark, or, the president was just silent on that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I can respond first. Yeah, Poder Latinx was definitely unsatisfied, right, with this response. We advocate for our immigrant community year round, recognizing the not only economic contribution that they make to our country. He stated this, but like you said, no human is illegal on this earth, and so really humanizing ourselves and our loved ones is super important. Latinos are like the fastest growing electorate. The United States is going to have a very large population of Latinos very soon, and so as both of you are very well aware of, Latinos make up a lot of sectors of the economy that don't have access to paid time off, to sick days, right? We take up jobs that sometimes are only hourly wages, so we don't have access to these benefits. And so because this is the case, paid leave would be extremely beneficial to make sure that those of us who are not lucky enough to have an employer that just so happens to offer it, we make sure that we're providing that equality and lifting us up from really systemic disparities.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Josie, I was wondering who would bring it up first. I think we can't talk about the State of the Union without talking about that. That is a huge setback. And I think you said it really well, Josie, at Family Values at Work and at Poder. We know for a fact that we work on issues. We are not political entities. We are issue advocacy-based organizations. And so we're going to speak up, even when somebody agrees with us on something. When somebody is out of line and not in alignment with our values, we can't let it go unsaid. So thank you both for naming that. And I'll also say, like, digging in on the care piece, I was disappointed not to hear paid sick and safe days mentioned. Last year, President Biden did name that explicitly, and I'd be curious if saying paid leave is meant to be just a lump, both long-term paid family and medical leave and paid sick and safe days. And I know we know language matters, like we can't just say paid leave and assume everyone's on the same page. I actually was surprised to see some folks last night posting about paid leave, elected officials who I have spoken with their staff and they understand the need for comprehensive paid family and medical leave, but I see us reverting just to family leave as shorthand a lot in the public. So I want us to get really clear. And if folks are working on these issues, do you know what I mean when I say paid leave? Because I mean both paid family and medical leave and paid sick and safe days. And I think that really matters. I also will say, I was hoping to hear more of a push and an onus on Congress with these issues, as opposed to just like, we believe in this, because we know that there needs to be partnership both between, the administration and the legislators to make sure that this happens, because this is a legislative solution that folks can't wait for. And Mel, I really appreciate you naming folks who are least likely to have it. I'm also thinking about contractors, part-time workers, folks who we don't think about, who don't have these traditional 9-to-5 roles. What does it look like to include them? Because I think I was hearing the president talk about the economy and supporting middle-class workers, but I think we need to be really intentional about what that looks like, because the middle class has evolved to what it means. And so the American dream no longer looks like what it was 40, even 10 years ago. So I think we need to get for real about what we mean when we say this. And Josie, I'm curious for you as well, where were we missing? I'd love to hear a little more from you.
Yeah, so I forgot to celebrate that there was lots of mention around reproductive freedom, justice, and rights. And like, that was a really, really big deal. And so that I was so happy to see that recommitment to that, whether you're pro-abortion or anti-abortion, I feel like the one thing we should be able to agree upon is that a woman should have the right to choose what happens to her body and the products of her body. We cannot revert to the days where the government owns humans and can therefore make decisions about humans' body. That has detrimental long-term impacts and is just a door we don't want to crack open. So that recommitment last night was great. But there wasn't any talk about how to back up that commitment and how to actually codify it, how to incentivize states to do better, how to incentivize the federal government to do better. There was no mention about commissioning any of the federal agencies under this administration to do creative things in order to protect reproductive rights, in order to protect workers in a different way. So I thought, that step was a little bit of a shortfall. The other thing that I thought was a shortfall too is like there was some talk about the global unrest and the genocide and the wars that we're seeing, but there was little connection to the actual implication that migration and this sort of global unrest will have to our already strained economy. Immigrants in this country already lack resources and access to resources. I have been through the immigration process of applying for my citizenship, where if you have access to any sort of public benefits, it can disqualify you from becoming a citizen or a protected class in this country. And so that the lack of connecting what's happening globally and the potential impacts it has because of migration to our economy in this country, to me didn't connect all the dots. And then the last thing I thought about was, as much as I am like, we absolutely need a fairer tax system, we absolutely need billionaires to pay their fair share, I am trying to figure out how we get Republicans to fully understand. And I think understanding isn't the right word, because I think Republicans get it. But how do we get Republicans to embrace that as a meaningful solution to raise revenue for this country? I feel like so many Republicans just are committed to not raising taxes on billionaires just out of political lip service. And we know that billionaires fund a ton of campaigns. And so they are a protected class for many elected officials. But the reality is, like, I don't know. I'm a little hesitant. I feel like it's almost a non-starter to name that as a key revenue source for the solutions that we need. So I hope that behind the scenes, that in this administration, there are economists that are thinking about multiple ways to finance the solutions that we need in an equitable way. Because if we're solely relying on, bipartisan support to tax billionaires, we're not going to see it soon. Though I know that we will do the work to ensure that we have the revenue that we need, and to talk to elected officials from across the aisle to really get them to not only understand, but to embrace multiple strategies towards raising the revenue that we need. But that, to me, I was like, that's great. And there's a whole section of folks who blindly commit to not raising money for billionaires. So what's the incentive? What's the real strategy? What's the plan? So that's a little bit of my skepticism, as much as I am excited about emerging conversations around tax fairness.
Yeah, I'll build off that and say it's actually not a political barrier. There's folks on both sides of the aisle who are not interested in taxing billionaires. So I'd actually even say, it, much like paid leave, there are folks, regardless of their party affiliation, who don't understand the drive for comprehensive. Same thing with tax fairness. So what does that look like for us? And leads me kind of to a next step question of, where are we going next? Mel and Josie, when you think about what do we do in the follow-up to the State of the Union, I know at Family Values and Work and Poder, we know that engaging our communities is 365, regardless of if it's an even or odd year. So what are we thinking about as our continued momentum from this big moment? Mel, I don't know if you want to elevate. I know you mentioned there's a lot of community-based events happening in Florida this weekend.
Yes, thank you. So as an organizer, I spend lots of time on the ground. Economy is always a primary concern for folks, right? And he touched on that at the State of the Union. So those who watched are definitely listening, not only listening, but feeling, right, the economic impacts firsthand. And so, part of our next steps is continuing to raise awareness. Unfortunately, there are folks who have never even heard of paid leave. They don't know that this is something that they deserve. They just see, oh, I just don't have vacation time from my job. And so education is definitely a big component of Poder Latinx's mission, informing people that this is something not only that we deserve, but we should be demanding actively. And then to add on to that, right, lots of Latinos that we speak to who recently migrated here, their countries of origin have paid leave. And this really goes to show how far behind the US is in terms of implementing a federal paid leave program. They come to this country, right, hoping for the American dream, a life that's of quality where we can live sustainably. But they come here not realizing that we don't even have some of the policies that they have in their countries of origin. So definitely building off of that education is the next step. And then, Poder Latinx is active on, all social medias, Facebook, X, Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. So you can definitely check those out to find out about local actions. We're in Arizona, Georgia, California, Washington, and Florida. So if you go onto our website, poderlatinx.org, you can find those actions on there.
Yeah. And Sammy, Mel, first of all, go Poder. You all are incredible partners. It is an honor to partner with you all. We are really clear that to get to the tipping point and to win what we actually need to win, it takes meaningful and values aligned partnerships. So grateful to our network of partners that includes Poder that are doing incredible work and partnering with us on a regular basis to ensure that we are building the power that we need to win. And to that end, Sammy, I think about how for us, our next steps continue to be ongoing public education of not just our folks, but of members of Congress, their chief of staff, their policy folks, so that this issue that you raised, Sammy, that we can use the same terminology, but do we actually mean the same thing? And I feel like that level of public education is more critical now than ever. You and I know so well, Sammy, that everyone is talking about paid leave. Everyone is talking about the need to ensure that people can work and care for their families. So we have done the work to socialize that language and to make paid family and medical leave a top priority to ensure that anyone who's talking about working families and who's talking about workers raises paid leave. We've done that work. What I'm not convinced of is whether everyone that's saying that means the same thing. And so,
I can tell you they definitely don't. In my experience, they definitely don't, which is our next step.
Exactly. So one of our key next steps is to make sure that we are making it clear what our bottom line is, what the bare minimum is when we say paid family and medical leave, including what we mean when we say family. That's critically important. So doing that public education and outreach work is really important. And I know for us that there are no off years, that an election year just means increased work and a different strategy. But we'll continue to do the work with state partners to make progress at the state level on state bills, but also to educate and activate voters so that folks aren't just voting their political subscription, but are actually voting the issues that are most important to them. And I think we have a key window of opportunity to do that and to build upon that. So that feels like very important next steps for us. And lastly, I just want to say that everyone that's listening, everyone that's involved should be activated to talk to their own state level elected officials and talk to your own member of Congress. But when it comes to members of Congress, go beyond talking to your own member of Congress, because they're not the only ones that their vote isn't the only one that influences your life. So go the extra step of talking to your neighboring state's member of Congress. Take on the challenge of talking to as many members of Congress as you can to let them know what's important to you. And if you want to be a superstar activist, talk to your sister, your friends, your mom, your aunties, your neighbors, your local barista, a child care worker. Talk to them about these issues, because the more we talk to other people, the more people feel seen and feel empowered to actually take action. These issues that we're talking about aren't accidental. They are a result of policy solutions, and we can build the power necessary to undo all of those policy solutions and make sure that our policies today reflect our families and our needs today. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's manageable in really good partnership. Sammy, what did I miss?
So you talked around it. If you are listening right now and you're like, how do I do all of this? Our incredible colleague, Stacy, is heading up our newest program, which is joining our Dive Action team. We actually have next Thursday night, March 14th, an opportunity for you to join her. If you're like, yes, I care about these issues. I don't know how to talk to my neighbors. What do those skills look like? How do I reach Congress? We have the place for you. And not only is that building with Family Values at Work directly, but Stacy will help you get connected to colleagues like Mel in the state, in your community, so you can be plugged in with both the national and the local movement. So I really encourage folks to check it out. It's at familyvaluesatwork.org/DIVE. We'd love to have you join our movement. I think the other thing is just paying attention. If your elected officials, whether or not you agree with them politically, like Josie was saying, if they're going to be in your community, it's a great chance to show up and ask them, what are you doing on these issues that impact my family? What was your reaction to the President's State of the Union? How are you going to follow through with this vision for our country? There is no limit to the ways that we can each individually influence this moment. I also think a lot about our colleagues we have a learning and culture change team here at Family Values at Work. And I'd encourage you to check out that section of our website as well. What are the small ways we can bring care further into the culture? How do we normalize that all of us, regardless of our age, where we live, whether or not we're parents, we all love somebody. Going back to your point about who family is often chosen. It is not just by blood. So what does it look like to have the tools to show up for our family? We're trying to redefine that and reset that narrative, because I think there's this classic image, right? It's like the nuclear family, mom, dad, 2 kids with a picket fence, and they live in the city where their parents are. So grandma and grandpa are there, but that's just not anybody's reality anymore. I won't speak for you, Josie and Mel, but like I live multiple hours from my parents and my in-laws. So oftentimes, if it's me and my husband can't handle something, it's my chosen family that's stepping up for me, that's taking me to the doctor, that's sitting with me and grieving with me in those moments. So like we're trying to build a world and redefine that culture. So I feel like that piece you said about talking to folks in your lives, that feels like the most important thing we can do, because we're all struggling with the same things, but it's about the language. We're maybe not all thinking about it as a care issue, but if you're having a climate crisis, if you just want a mental health day, if you want to go on vacation, that's care for yourself, right? So like, how do we redefine that together? So that's what's at top of my mind for myself.
Oh, I love this so much. I feel like we could talk for hours and we should figure out how we do more of this talking and conversing together. Mel, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, we absolutely love Poder Latinx and are so grateful for our partnership. I am sending you good vibes as you work through the weekend to do the important work in Florida of voter engagement and activation and outreach. We know that work produces results and really affects change, and the very change that we need. So I'm so grateful for you and for your work. Sammy, you always kick butt. You are so knowledgeable on all things federal, all things policy. We are a stronger organization and a stronger movement because of the work that you do. So I am so, so grateful. Big shout out to Family Values at Work's digital team that makes all of this look so easy. All you have to do is show up and, really have this conversation that educates the public. They make it look so easy for us. So to our digital team, thank you so, so much. Folks, please search for Family Values at Work. Search for Por Ayer Latinx, and you will find us on all of the social media platforms, and follow us along to stay to get activated and engaged. Lastly, on this International Women's Day, I just want to remind people of a quote that goes around in our movement a lot. I know this won't be the case for Mel for the weekend, but just a reminder that rest isn't a reward for the work. It's part of the work. And it's why we need the care infrastructure that we need, so that we don't have to sacrifice our bodies for the work. We don't have to sacrifice time with our families for the work, but that rest is actually part of the work, should be codified in our policies as part of the work, as part of being human. And so with that, I wish you all a happy International Women's Day. We hope to see you in the future events and on social media platforms. If you heard something that hit you and impacted you, and we want to see your own reflections to the State of the Union, we look forward to continuing to engage with you all. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Sammy. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Josie. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah.